Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name's Gareth McLaughlin. As you heard, I'm the Vice President of Product Management for our services portfolio. So our managed defense offering, our intel capabilities, and work with our consulting teams to put that service wrap together. And it's my privilege today, along with my colleague Trish Tobin, who's our Director of Product Marketing, to introduce expertise on demand to you. In one of the keynotes, Tony Cole said, one of the biggest challenges we've got is there just aren't enough trained cybersecurity people. What are we going to do about it? Well, we've got an answer, or we've got one way of starting to solve that problem. That's really what we're going to talk about today. And this is where I would need a clicker, or... here we go. Perfect. Thank you. Many of you will be familiar with, in fact, you're probably already customers of managed defense. You may use our intel services. You may have used our consulting practice in the past. Some of you may have even put an IR retainer in place in order to make sure that you're protected in the event that there's a breach. Expertise on demand is our way of actually trying to make sure that everything we have on our services side becomes available to all of our customers, to find ways to actually get better at joining the services that we have into our product so we can make them available to you, whenever you need them, within the workflow, within the tools you're actually using, and so you can access and use any of the capabilities that we have. But before we talk about what it is and what we have today and where we're going, I'll tell you a little bit about why we've gone down this journey, why we decided that we needed to think differently about the way in which we would bring services to our customers and our partners. It's a small audience, but I'll ask the questions anyway. How many of you here would say, actually, I'm good. I've got all the people I need. Don't need anyone else? No one? Would say the same within FireEye, especially when we have a finance team sitting in the audience. Second question for you. When you do end up trying to bring someone on board, who here has found it easy to find the right person, to get the right skill set, to get them into your business and keep them? No. It's a common thing that I hear every single time that I talk to our customers and go out and talk to CISOs. The biggest challenge is finding and keeping staff. Number of pieces of survey research that's gone on. We're all getting to that point where the lack of cybersecurity professionals are actually starting to cause the biggest risk for our businesses. The report here suggests that it's now to the point where 50% of organizations find that to be critical. The sorts of things that are actually causing the impact if you don't have people. My existing team is having to work harder. I'm starting to miss more alerts. 34% of organizations say, I'm having to start outsourcing. Selfishly, I don't mind that one. But it's that problem which is saying, okay, if that is an issue, how do we go forward? Now, if you're a CISO and you're building out your team and you're fortunate enough to actually get budgets to bring someone in, what sort of person do you need? What's the right next set of skills that would actually help reduce risk for you in your business? Is it a malware reverse engineer? Is it an intel guy? Is it an incident responder? Is it someone else to kind of work and look at alerts, sit in the SOC, work shift? It's difficult. An organization has to try and work out, I can only bring one person in, but if I make the wrong choice, I may well end up making not solving the problem. I may have the wrong person at that time when something becomes critical. So as we thought about this and try to work through how are we actually going to start helping deal with this problem, we needed to get a feel for what's the size of the problem there. There are many reports out at the moment on the number of unfilled cybersecurity jobs. The consensus is roughly about 1.2 million, 2016, 2017 globally. Some people put it as high as 3.5 million in 3 to 4 years' time. Now, we don't quite know whether those are, how accurate those numbers are. We don't know whether the jobs they're talking about are all people sitting in SOCs actually dealing with issues, or people like me who wouldn't recognize a reflective DLL loading attack if it came up and introduced itself at a party. But the issue is, this is growing at about 400,000 people a year. That's the size of a gap and how quickly it's growing. 400,000 is a lot of people. I went digging. If I took every computer science graduate coming out of all the US schools, all of the European Union schools, and there's an awful lot of countries there, although there may be one less in March next year, and if I took all of the computer science graduates in India, I get to 325,000 a year. So that's not even enough. If I took every computer science graduate and turned them into a computer security professional, it's not enough to even keep the problem where it is today. So then we try to turn it and think about it in terms of money. Now, the average salary for cybersecurity professional in the US is roughly about 145,000, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't know what it is globally. Let's say it's 50,000 a year. That means that if there are going to be 3 million plus unfilled jobs in 2021, and if each of those jobs was roughly 50,000 a year, that's around 150 billion of unfulfilled, unmet security spend that's out there. That's bigger than the entire IT security industry that we have today. Now, that doesn't mean that all of that money is actually going to get spent on things. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that it's all going to end up coming into our expertise on demand, much as Kevin and Travis would like that. But it does mean that the size of the problem's there. And there's lots of different ways of trying to deal with that skill shortage. Everything that we're doing on things like Helix, putting security operation and automation in place. Everything we're trying to do to actually put context into products. Again, helping to shrink that problem. But we wanted to think about whether there was another way, another approach that FireEye could take to help solve what I see to be the biggest issue facing our industry. So we went looking at parallels. We thought about who else is trying to approach and deal with the situations where there's this mismatch between supply and demand. And anything in the on-demand economy is a great example for that. So the approach we took is to think, okay, could we come up with something which actually borrows from some of these ideas? Could we find a different way of actually being able to match the skill sets, the capabilities that we have, so that we can make them available to our customers, to our partners, when they need them? Could we make it as easy as being able to say, I just need you to come and look at this particular alert for me. I just need you to go and check this particular endpoint and triage it for me. I need you to just go and look at this particular piece of malware, or I just need an extra hand to help out at this point in time because we're swamped and we've got a bit of an incident and we could do with the extra support. So we started to think through what would that look like? How could we put something together in place to do it? What if, instead of just hiring an individual, you could actually get a team? So with that, I'd like to bring Trish up on the stage. Trish has been spending a lot of time over the last 2-3 months going out and talking to a lot of our customers and a lot of partners to really understand what sort of services we need to put together in order to actually be able to deliver on this.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Trish Tobin, and I lead product marketing for Managed Defense, Threat Intelligence, and Expertise on Demand. And the absolute best part of my job is I get to go out and I get to talk to people like you and find out what's the state of your security program, where do you see gaps, where do you need help, and importantly, how can FireEye help you? So about 2 years ago, we were doing focus group testing for Managed Defense, and we went to several regions of the country, brought together pools of security practitioners and asked them a bunch of questions. And out of all of that research, there's one guy that stood out. There were a lot of conversations, but there was one guy that just really stood out to me. His name was Mike. He was in Chicago, and he was running a big healthcare organization. And he said, I consider myself pretty fortunate. My company believes in security. They're funding me to an adequate level. My team has the tools that they need. But my team, if I had to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give them a solid 7. And it's not their fault. They're really bright guys. The problem is they don't know what they don't know. They don't know who's out there. They don't know the latest techniques the attackers are up to. They only experience a breach about once a year. And so that's where I feel like I'm exposed. It would be really cool if I could know that FireEye had my back. And this idea kind of tumbled throughout that group, and it's like, yeah, that would be really awesome. So that was the genesis of Expertise on Demand. Okay, so fast forward, the other part of my job that I absolutely love is I get to work with some of the smartest people in the industry, both the customers and the people that I work with at FireEye. And we are passionately committed to fighting evil, and even more passionately committed to making sure that our customers are successful. So over the last couple of years, we've interviewed customers, we've found out there's a trend here, and we've kind of been, as Gareth said, thinking differently about how do we solve this problem. That's what Expertise on Demand is, and I'm very excited to introduce that to you today. Expertise on Demand is available to our current FireEye customers, and one of the things that we learned in talking to customers about what expertise is, what do they need, what gaps do they have, is this expertise actually falls into 3 bucket categories if you think about. First is, as Gareth said, the expertise when you need it. So this isn't changing the way you do your workflows. It's not changing the way that you do investigation. It's not changing the tools that you have. It's really, contacting FireEye and saying, I see this piece of malware. Can you help me out? Can you reverse engineer it? I see this signature in my investigation that I don't know what it is. Can you help tell me what you know about it? Also, for some of the customers in the audience, you may have an incident response retainer from Mandiant right now. That's part of the package as well. We haven't changed anything in terms of having you have access to Mandiant. However, just kind of think of it as something where it's a different way that you can purchase it. It's kind of like a cash or credit kind of thing. But because our customers did want to know, they wanted the assurance of having our incident responders on speed dial, that's part of that first pillar as well. The second thing that we heard from customers was, you've probably heard it in the first day of this conference, one of the things FireEye is exceptionally proud of is the fact that we know more about cyber attackers than anyone. In fact, quick side note, I don't know if you guys have seen the latest Forrester New Wave that just came out on external threat intelligence. They rated us the only leader in that report. So not only do we get to say it, but we've got some third-party validation that that's true as well. So there's 2 reasons why we why we got that recognition, and it's very applicable to Expertise on Demand. First of all, the breadth of portfolio. We have the subscriptions, we have the information that you can access, but we're also very committed to making sure our customers are successful using that intel. And so not only do you have the subscriptions, but you can ask an analyst, what do I do with this? What do you think the attackers are going to do next? How do I use this within my workflows to make sure that you get the maximum amount you can from that investment? The second piece is the data that we have available to you. So if you think about FireEye, it's not just one front line, it's actually multiple front lines. So we're the Managed Defense. We have people that are seeing the latest campaigns that are running out there across our customer base. With Mandiant Consulting, we get victim intelligence. We see what's happening on the world's most consequential breaches. From our products, we have product telemetry that's brought in. And then from our threat intelligence organization, we have organization that is bigger than what most countries have, that is looking at all that data, making the correlation, building dossiers on different attackers, who they are, what their motivations are, the tools, techniques, and procedures that they use, and they can in turn advise our customers in terms of how to bring that into their security practices, right? So that was great recognition. When we were looking at Expertise on Demand, we said, how do we take that information, the threat intelligence is out there, turn it into microservices, have ask an analyst show up, say that fast, ask an analyst show up so that we can make sure that you make the best use of that information within your programs. The third part of it, when we talked to customers, was just that whole issue of making sure you're keeping up with the threat landscape. What does your training look like? How do you make sure that you receive the same training that our incident responders do, that our security professionals do at FireEye. And so a component of that is having you take the same training that our people do. When we see something at a Mandiant incident response, we learn a technique that the attackers have added to their toolbook. That becomes an exercise within our training classes. So you're literally training alongside our people. Okay, so we talked about threat intelligence a little bit. A key component of expertise on demand is making sure that you have access to the same situational awareness that we do. So how does that show up? I get to work with a lot of our SEs too, and Tim Gallo in the West built this picture for me, and of course I put Mike in Chicago right into this role. He's taking the L into Chicago, and he's on his phone, and he's scrolling past, and he sees that there's a threat that's very applicable to the healthcare industry. Not only do we tell him who those attackers are, what their motivations are, how they're getting into the environment, we give him guidance in terms of what are the top priority things he should do within his program to make sure he's protected from that most recent attack. So he's on the train and he's pulling up his cell phone and he contacts one of the people on his team and says, hey, I want you to run this scan. I want you to make sure the system's hardened. He goes down a litany of things. And so by the time he gets into work, he's feeling pretty good. So he puts down his briefcase and he goes into the break room and he goes and gets a coffee. And he meets one of his security leaders. And in my scenario, of course, this is a woman. And his boss says, hey, so, Mike, did you hear about this thing on the Wall Street Journal? I'm really worried. The board's, calling me. Are we okay? And he's like, yep, I got it covered, right? And that sounds hokey, but our customers are experiencing that every day. And so that's really the power of threat media highlights. If you are also a FireEye iSight customer, you're familiar with our quarterly intel briefings. And what that is a more strategic take on what the trends in the threat landscape are. We sit down with our customers once a quarter. We take a high-level view of what we see, where we think the attackers are going. And that's more the strategic analysis. But again, that's what we're sharing with our customers, and they're very popular, very, very well attended. The last piece of this is really, that I talked about earlier in terms of giving customers access to our threat intel holdings. So think about that in terms of if you have a signature that comes up or an IOC or something where you just say, hey, I want to see what FireEye knows about this. This is literally querying the same data set that data repository that our researchers use, our incident responders use to see what we know about those attackers. You have access to that as well. Okay, I'm violating one of my primary rules of good presentation skills. Steve Jobs, please forgive me. Way too much type, way too many letters, way too many words. But I do want to make 3 important points about this. With Expertise on Demand, it is an annual subscription. As part of that subscription, you will pick a package of tokens. Each one of these services has a token value associated with it. And it's pretty straightforward. If it's something where it takes a small amount of input or analysis on our part, it has a lower token value. If you attend one of our 3-day trainings and there's more time involved, or if we do a custom threat intel briefing, that has a higher unit price associated with it. But there's another thing associated with this. We wanted to make this package as easy for our customers to get started with. We've heard from some customers around the globe, people that are just starting on their journey with Intel-led security, and they're kind of getting their feet wet with some of our packages. And so we created a smaller package for you kind of to dip your toe in the water, use it. If you want to put in an incident response retainer, that's cool. If you want to start using some of the Intel services. But then as you get more experience with the package, you can always top that off. You can buy additional tokens. So, when we went back and did some of the message testing, the customers were kind of like, this is a fabulous idea. I don't know what my usage would look like on a day-to-day basis. And so we've taken that away as a potential objection just by making it really, really easy to use and to get started and to top off your packages. So again, with that customer conversation where they've come back and they've said, Trish, this sounds like a really great idea, but how do you think I would use it? And I'm a former SE, and so I would much rather be in front of you with a whiteboard and a bright red marker than this little clicker thing. So the first thing I would do is I would ask you, so let's talk about the goals for your program. You want to try to move up the security maturity curve. You have goals that you're trying to accomplish. Walk me through those. What do they look like? And the first thing you may say is, I want to make sure that I'm prepared should a breach occur. Okay, we'll sit down and we'll put an incident response retainer in place, and that's twofold. We take you through an incident response preparedness service, so we're both ready to respond should a breach occur, and then we put an SLA in place. The next thing you may say to me is, I'm really trying to be more Intel-led in my security program. I really need to know, I'm in the healthcare industry, what attackers are most likely to come after me. We'll do a custom threat briefing and we'll tell you what we know about those attackers. We may do some custom research on your part, but it's all about making your program more effective so that you can prioritize your actions and kind of go through and think about what you want to focus on both short and long term. The next thing you may say is, now that I know who's likely to come after me, I want to make sure my team is up to speed in terms of training and knowing anticipating what those attackers may bring on. We'll put some training services in place that are specific to your environment. Then lastly, because you've made these investments in your program, you want proof. You want to be able to go to your leadership team and say, hey, look at all the improvements I've made this year because of expertise on demand. And so you need metrics and you need measurements. So we'll either put in place a red team, a tabletop exercise, we can do pen testing, whichever you prefer. But it's really about knowing the progress that you've made, being able to share that, and then setting up your goals for next year. Okay? The second line is more of that tactical support, the ask an analyst. You're in the middle of an investigation and you just want to know we've got your back, how can we help you? So for example, if you run across an executable and you don't know what that is, you can give it to us, we can do malware analysis on it, and we can share what we know with that attacker. If you see malicious activity on your environment and you need help attributing that to a specific attack group so that you know what next actions to take on that part, we can help you with that as well. And then just lastly is, I really do want to reinforce that we provide the threat media highlights on a daily basis and the quarterly intel briefings, only because that's so important for you keeping up with the threat actors. So now I'm going to welcome Gareth back up on the stage, and he's going to go through where we're taking expertise on demand in the short term.
Thanks, Trish. So as you heard, what we have out there and operating now is giving you access to our Intel capabilities, our Intel analysts, our malware research engineers, our Intel holdings, our consulting capabilities, our IR teams. But when I started, I said, my goal is to make sure everything we do in our services portfolio becomes available, and to make sure that everything can be used when you need it, within the workflow, within the tools that you're currently operating. So we're not just going to sit there and say that's enough. We've taken the best things that we have available to our managed defense or our IR customers, put it together. We're now looking at the next set of services we want to bring through. And the way we've designed this program is to make sure that whenever you sign a contract, it doesn't matter if we then introduce a new service in a month's time, 2 months' time, 6 months' time, that service is immediately available to you. You don't have to wait to the next subscription round. You don't have to wait till the next year. They're always going to be there. Whatever you start with will continue to expand. The 3 areas that we're focusing on for the start of 2019. Investigation on demand. This is being able to take our managed defense analysts, our security consultants, and make them available so they can drop in and actually look at a particular incident that might be operating within your environment. Maybe it's to give you extra information on an alert that you're seeing. Maybe it's to tell you how they would go about actually investigating and dealing with that particular alert. Maybe, if you have our endpoint technology, it's for us to actually go in and use it and run that particular investigation for you. Take a second look, deal with it, help you out. Our second element is to think about our hunting capabilities. Now, our managed defense customers benefit from the fact that we have a whole team of hunters, and we have a very developed, mature methodology for producing new hunting techniques to look for any evidence of a compromise in the absence of an alert. Well, that's great, but what happens for our customers who haven't signed up to managed defense? Maybe they're concerned about a campaign or something which is actually hitting them right now. Maybe it's something that's been triggered by the threat media highlights. Maybe it's something that we've talked about in terms of community protection. What we want to do is to be able to say, okay, if you want us just to do a hunting activity this one time in your environment, you can get us to do it. If you just want us to look for one particular campaign, you can get us to do it. And the third bit is to make sure that these services are built in to the products. So that when you're sitting there using Helix, when you're using Endpoint, you're able to reach out and engage that capability. Ask an Intel analyst. Get us to tell you what we know about this particular alert, this particular group. As the person responsible for our services strategy, sometimes I get invited to present to partners. I had that back in January down in New Orleans, Momentum, a room like this. And whenever I'm being asked to come and talk to partners, that normally means I'd better go and check that my life assurance policy is up to date. Because unfortunately, because we have a services capability, we're often seen as potentially competitive, rightly or wrongly. So the key bit for me around expertise on demand was to make sure I designed it from day one to be friendly, supportive, and beneficial to partners. There's three things that we're doing for this. First of all is to make sure that the capabilities that we have are available for our partners to bring and add to their portfolio. If you don't have malware reverse engineers, if you don't have Intel analysts, you can use ours and include that in your proposition out to your customers. What we're working on with a number of partners, some of whom are in our audience today, are looking at how do we actually make this as a proposition which goes directly to them. So instead of just reselling expertise on demand to a customer, how could you, the partner, become our customer? How could you go and use our services and our capabilities to backstop your own team? Maybe it's because there is an extra deluge of malware or activity going on and you just want an extra resource. Maybe it's just to add in a capability that you don't currently have or don't necessarily need to hire just yet, so you can start to build the business. And over time, given everything I said around the problem of the lack of resources, skilled resources out there in the industry, I think we'll get to a situation where it won't just be FireEye resources that are actually delivering the service. We'll be able to build that relationship where sometimes it will be our partners' services that are actually being driven and delivered through expertise on demand. So we actually start to work together rather than having services competing with our partners. So I said, it's a pleasure for me to be able to actually introduce expertise on demand. I think this is going to change the way in which FireEye is actually working with its services portfolio, bringing it into our products and working with our partners. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you. Please. There's a couple of microphones. We'll just get them through so everyone can hear the question.
So a lot of what you said sounds really interesting because my biggest problem with stalking staff is you need 90% of your expertise about 10% of the time, which means for the day-to-day, I really need 5 or 6 analysts to just grind through the work, but you need 2 or 3 really high experts who are going to get bored doing the day-to-day. So how would that look if instead maybe I could staff slightly less experienced people and pull it in for, let's say, bringing in better intel, building content, because a lot of what you focused on was after an incident happens. My department primarily, because I work with the SIMs and things like that, is trying to either catch it when it happens or just the day-to-day malware and things like that. So how would you help me before something blows up in my face?
Good. So I think that comes to maybe three different bits. First of all is the fact that we are giving you what we know about new things that are appearing, the campaigns that we're seeing from the management resources, the campaigns that we're seeing from the work we're doing on the Intel side, digging into the underground forums, looking at the activities that go through. So we're starting to give you kind of the heads up that we think something new is about to happen. Within the products, of course, we're giving as much context as we can, but often the context is really tied to it has to be digestible, it has to be easy for your SOC 1 analyst to be able to use and make a quick prioritization. But there'll always be situations in there where it's, I don't know what to do next, or I need a bit more information about this. It's this particular piece of malware. It looks like it's being used in a particular campaign. What are the other tools that this group might use? If I've seen that as the initial compromise, what are the things that they might be using and I should look for within my environment? So that's a place where, again, our managed defense team or our intel analysts are able to say, here's the sort of things to look for, here's the activity to go and sweep your environment for, or do you want us to go and do it for you? So it's really, the goal is to get to that stage where it's almost as easy as standing up and shouting across the cube or getting on your internal chat client and getting us to actually be able to come in and do that.
Is it something that you could actually do that connector for me, like actually build content? We have the tools, we have the SIM, but maybe we wouldn't have somebody advanced enough to connect point A to point B. Is that something that you guys would be able to interface with?
I think that's one that would take a little bit more time to dig into, it, particularly in terms of actually setting up and you're talking about making sure that your SIM is actually collecting the right logs, pulling the right threat intel in to do that, or that.
The content in general, just creating the alert that maybe the tool or whatever doesn't have. As you were saying, you guys have frontline intel. Well, I mean, having something pop in the main channel for your analyst or something like that, is that something that's on the table?
It is, but it's something we're doing in two ways. One is through how we're using and taking logs into things like Helix to decorate it and the sorts of rules and capabilities we build into that. And then the way in which we can take and use our intel into a SIM and the analyst services behind that. Any other questions? Oh, please.
Thank you. How does FireEye scale to an incident if you have numerous customers who are on the service and an incident hits at the same time everywhere and you get 144 panic calls? How do you scale your staff to service all those calls, all those customers at once?
Yeah. This is one of the key ones for us today in our managed defense capability. We have hundreds of customers running there. What we see is often, a campaign will start in one particular organization, one particular industry, and we'll start to see it move through. And in most situations, the fact that we are seeing it across multiple customers means we're very quickly able to effectively generate either a particular sweep or a particular activity or a particular IOC that will go and operate within that. So it actually allows us to use the processes that we have, the intel and the technology, to actually get that leverage. So it's very much yes, we're using analysts behind that, but it's not just individual analysts. It's the fact they're sitting there with the tools, with all the processes, the fact we can pull the management consultants in as well as needed to scale, and the fact that we can operate, have one individual manage and support multiple customers at the same time. Okay. Oh, please.
Hey, Gareth. Great session. Can you talk about the pricing model? Can you talk about the token model?
Yes, you'll have heard Trish talk about how we're using tokens to actually structure all this. So this is an annual subscription. As Trish said, we're making sure that it is, there's a range of different packages available, starting with a very small, low-scale package, so it's easy for customers to get started. That subscription gives customers both the access to the services like the threat intel, the quarterly briefings, the emerging campaigns, but then also gives you tokens to spend. Most of those tokens, we're seeing customers wanting to use to actually just engage with our analysts, to get access to our intel, to find out what's going on about a particular report, a particular incident, to access a report that we might have, or to get an individual question answered to them. But those same tokens can be used across any of the other consulting services that we have. One of the problems we've had, or one of the challenges that many of our customers have raised with us is, I want to have the protection of a IR SLA. I want to know that if something happens, I can use Mandiant for IR. But chances are it's not going to happen during the year. And I don't want to put money aside and then find that I didn't use it at the end of the year because an IR didn't happen. So the goal for us to say, you've got those units, you can use it across anything. If the worst happens, you know you've got Mandiant on speed dial for the IR engagements, and you can use those tokens to pay for that. But if not, you can use it to support your team, deal with incidents that come up from the Intel side, and get training. Does that answer your question? Please.
So if we pre-purchase a certain number of tokens and they're not used in the year, do they roll over to the next year, or do they have some sort of expiration date?
So the way that we're structuring it, at least for this launch, is to say, you get an annual subscription. We ask you to use those tokens during the year, and we work with you to figure out how best to use those tokens. And it's one of the reasons of making sure that we can start with a small package, because this is a new thing. Customers say, well, I want to start, but I don't want to put too much aside. So it's a great way to do that. One of the other requests that we had when feeding this through and talking to our customer advisory board is, well, I want to start, but I also want to make sure that I can top up. Because as I use them, I want to make sure I've always got that balance, so I never get into a situation where I've used all those tokens, something happens, and I don't know what to do. So we're exploring both of those models. Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for your attention today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.